So good afternoon. Welcome to another webinar that is this time for our cannabis cultivators. So for several years, the Nevada County had the objective of supporting a legal cannabis industry, especially after the passage of Measure W, and also the enforcement of unpermitted cultivators. And this year, in 2021, the Nevada County Board of Supervisors included cannabis in their list of priority objectives that includes improving upon the cannabis permitting and enforcement programs, as well as investigating options for additional license types for basically larger cultivation areas and also micro businesses for economic development. And now county staff, which we have here, Craig and Jeff, they are engaged in the community and they're looking for feedback specific to, they want your thoughts and ideas about allowances for larger cultivations and micro business license types. So let me kick this off maybe with Craig Griesbach, our building director. Is should there be a residency requirement to cultivate cannabis in Nevada County?
Thank you, Pascal. And I'd like to welcome everybody. You know, everyone's time is valuable, so spending an hour with us means a lot to kind of drive our policies and give us some feedback along the way. So the question about having a residence required is just one of the many we're wanting to get feedback on, but it's something where there may be some opportunities where we can remove some barriers to entry to still meet the original intent of the ordinance. So we're really looking for feedback, and we've kind of got each end of the spectrum on this. Is, you know, there's some benefits related to security, there's some benefits related to investment and longevity in our community related to the residents, but there's also some pitfalls associated to that, putting, you know, some older manufactured homes that maybe are as sightly as some of the neighborhoods want. So it's just, we're wanting to get holistic feedback on these type of questions, and that's just one example.
Jeff, anything to add?
Yeah, I think that sums it up.
Okay, so if cultivation license types would be expanded, so what canopy sizes do you think at this point would be ideal for this community?
So, and this is a primary point of emphasis that we want to get feedback on related to canopy sizes, because we know there's some opportunity to be more competitive in this industry locally, but also protect our way of life here and our natural resources. So there's some opportunities for larger parcels that we've talked internally as our CEA team. There's opportunities for possibly using adjacent parcels, and also some opportunities related to site-specific CEQA evaluation related to permitting and things like that. So we're really just trying to find what that sweet spot is if we change this in the county, and how we're going to be able to make that work moving forward. Jeff, anything you have to add on that one?
So one of the questions that was sent in ahead of time is, are permits transferable if an owner sells a property?
Jeff, you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, so the permit stays with the property. There is a process, and we're trying to fine tune this right now to where you could transfer that permit to a new owner. Craig, I don't know if you have anything to add on that, but there's a few kinks we're trying to work out on our end, just so that our system matches the new owner information, and there's various updates that are going to need to be had with, you know, the state licensing, the ACP, making all that consistent with the new owner.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of land use entitlements for any other business outside of cannabis typically run with the land, as was kind of our original intent with this ordinance. But there is a clause in there right now that does prohibit that to a certain extent as far as transferring permits. But we are working on an internal process to meet the intent of what we had originally designed for the ordinance. So more to come on that in the coming weeks and months.
Okay, great. And would you consider aligning the total canopy size to the state cultivation licensing type for indoor grows? For example, the state has a specialty indoor license that will allow up to 5,000 square feet of total canopy, and Nevada County limits it to 2,500 square foot on 5-acre parcels. And the person says it would be nice to have up to 5,000 square feet of canopy on 5-acre parcels if it's grown indoors. The state license fee for up to 5,000 square foot is about $20,000 annually, and we are limited to half of that in Nevada County, but we have to pay the full annual fee to the state.
So this is the exact feedback we're asking for. So it's just giving us that information if there's things we haven't thought of before. But definitely, we've talked about this internally and with other stakeholders as well. This opportunities for alignment with state licenses and alignment with other regulations as well. So we have heard that, but keep this feedback coming because this is exactly what we're looking for.
Well, then let me continue because we have more where that came from. From somebody who is one of the first 12 legal farms in Nevada County. As the smallest allowable commercial farm allowed, it's extremely difficult to have a profitable small business because the 100-foot setback from the property line pushes them into the least growable area of their 6 acres. And in this extremely competitive market, it's almost impossible to grow enough product on 2,500 square foot to make it go as a small business. Small farms should be allowed to grow more if they have no complaints from their neighbors, for example. And then also the 2-year transition period to permit all structures, regardless if associated with cultivation, plus COVID happening, of course, in the 2nd year of operation, seems unreasonable and unfair. The requirement is keeping farmers from signing into the regulated market. What are your thoughts on that?
So one of the main reasons we're having this discussion, as I mentioned earlier, is try to figure out that sweet spot to make sure this industry is successful long term, while also protecting our neighborhoods as well, because we get both sides. So we recognize that there is a need and to have some flexibility for canopy sizes, just to be competitive. So we've heard that. There are discussions over recent months and even discussions with the board and staff over this last year. Other feedback like transition periods, anything like that is also what we're looking for process improvement for our program. So there may be some opportunities there. The transition period is interesting because no other development has that allowance. It's only in cannabis. So again, there's kind of both sides there. But we understand there are circumstances associated to that specific to projects. So we have heard, cultivators in good standing. We've heard that feedback before, and that does make sense in a lot of different ways. So that's good feedback.
And people would like to know if there's a process to apply for variance of the 1,000-foot setback requirement from sensitive sites. They would like an opportunity to show their facility and the layout. They want to build an auxiliary building about 800 feet from the property line. And if they're required to put it over the 1,000-foot setback, they will have to clear some land and remove more trees.
So right now there is no variance process for the 1,000-foot setback to sensitive sites. There are some specific to state park land, where I believe you can get down to 600 feet. Does that sound right, Jeff? Remember right? And so there are some specific area variances, but related to churches, daycares, things like that, there isn't any specific variance that you can apply for right now.
And if the reason for allowing cannabis cultivation is to create tax revenue and to help citizens to have an opportunity to get into this as a legit business, and as well to get maybe some illegal growers to become legal, why is the ordinance so strict? And especially the sensitive area clause, then the state is 600 feet, but the county apparently is 1,000 foot, according to Jeff here.
Jeff, you want to take a stab at answering that one?
Yeah, this kind of all goes back to the EIR on how it was constructed and the review that was done. So 1,000 foot setbacks was how the EIR was studied. And so that's why that exists currently.
So the EIR is for people that may not know, is the environmental impact report that was completed for the cannabis throughout our entire county. So there is a lot of regulation associated to California Environmental Quality Act, local regulation, and state regulations that we rely on leverage to make this program happen. We were very calculated when we were creating this program. A lot of other counties are having issues with getting state license approval because they're not doing enough review meeting those standards. So it's this balance we're trying to keep throughout this program.
The question about fire safety, because there's been a number of fires that have been that started on cannabis farms. Is there anything that can be done about that threat that really affects the whole community? That is definitely one of the really negative impacts if there is, I don't know, faulty wiring, etc. So, what can be done to emphasize fire safety with cannabis cultivation?
Jeff, you want to answer?
Yeah, so I mean, all of the fires that have occurred, to my knowledge, in the past couple of years have been on unpermitted sites. So that's a larger, more difficult question on how to address these unpermitted sites from doing the activity they're doing, which are causing the electrical fires, et cetera. So this is kind of a bigger, more enforcement discussion. As far as the permitted sites, that's kind of why we have this whole process, is to go through, review, go through and having inspections to make sure that everything's up to code. So we're pretty confident that our permitted sites are fire safe, being that fire is part of that review. 4290 is a requirement, but most of these fires, all of these fires actually, are coming from the unpermitted sites that are doing things without permits anyway. So that's a tougher discussion.
And Melanie says, my understanding is that distribution licenses are not allowed in Nevada County. Is that accurate? And if so, do you expect to allow distribution licenses in the future?
So that's definitely part of this discussion, because right now you can do essentially self-transport, but the micro business license type side is what we're talking about. So it could involve manufacturing, it could involve distribution, it could involve some aspects of tourism. So that's, we're defining down, I guess the feedback we're looking for is what exactly do you need for your business to be successful? So what type of distribution, what type of manufacturing are you looking for, and what are you not looking for?
And here's another question for changes to the 100-foot setback. They are putting together their application, and the 100-foot setback requirement will cost them over $100,000. They have a fully permitted shop 30 feet from the property line, more than 300 feet from the neighbor's home, which is, by the way, zoned ag, that they can't use for processing, even though their rural neighbors are also growers. So variance seems to be a big interest.
Yeah. There's a lot of unique shaped parcels and size parcels in the county. So and we have so much topography here, it makes sense. I mean, unless you want to do massive grading or things like that, you have to put it on kind of natural areas that work a little bit better for you. So we understand that is an issue for sure.
Right. Will small cultivators have equal opportunities to expand as cultivators on 20-acre parcels? For example, would a 2,500 square foot operator be able to expand their existing cultivation plan on their 5 acres? So that they think that cultivators should be given equal opportunity to expand.
So can you repeat that one again, Pascal, real quick?
Yeah, if you go from 5 acres to 20 acres, can you expand your 2,500 square foot growing area?
Yeah, right now it's completely based on parcel size. So parcel size drives canopy up to 10,000 square feet. So if you have a 5-acre parcel, you're going to be able to grow a smaller canopy, obviously, as compared to a 20 or 40-acre parcel.
And adjacent properties under the same ownership should be able to have an additional license without another dwelling, without the dwelling requirement, the residency requirement. Is that an option?
So again, that's what we're talking about right now. Currently, you require a residence on each parcel in order to cultivate maximum canopy sizes. So if there, I mean, I guess that's what we're wanting to know what the request is. What's the need? Are you, on adjacent parcels, having one residence if there's common ownership? Is it the request not to have a residence at all for cultivation? It's kind of, that's the feedback we're looking for.
Okay, great. I would like to invite if participants, if you feel comfortable, if you want to raise your hand and you want to ask your question live instead of having to type them in, I'm happy to pull you in. So if you want to, if you raise your hand, then we can go and just get you to talk. And there we have Abraham. Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hello. Hey, thank you so much for doing this. As I kind of wrote here in the chat, I wanted to suggest an option of doubling up on the existing properties. So if I have 10,000, I could do 20,000, and someone that has 2,500 can do 5,000 canopy, square feet canopy. And I think that will put us in that sweet spot, Craig. I know there's a lot of talk about having acres, and I'm sure there's some parcels that can really do an acre, but I think that gradually kind of increase is what we want to see at the moment. And the second thing is about adjacent properties, and I know it's an issue for a lot of properties right now, and people want to expand through that options. But if we can cut that requirement for the extra dwelling, that will be huge on the expenses and on the types of the housing that we want to kind of, not have as much. Even though I will say, I don't think it's a bad thing having houses built, but I can understand why it has to be controlled, and it might not be necessary just for a cannabis cultivation to build a whole house and go in that $600,000, $700,000 expenses. Of course, I know you can do it cheaper, but even all the options are really expensive. The basic materials went up high 30%. The game is changing, and I also want to note the last thing is the market is a little bit dipping. So the cannabis market, that is, and so there's going to be changes on that too. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Abram. John Foley, are you ready to talk?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Absolutely.
Again, thank you all for taking the time to do this. We truly appreciate the county's open-mindedness towards changing the ordinance or making tweaks to make it this is a sustainable industry in the county. The thing that I've preached kind of over and over again is we need to have business model flexibility within our county. You know, this is a rapidly changing marketplace. We need to be nimble and adaptable, and we can't be limited to one or two business model types. And so I think the key is to make tools available for the success of our local industry. You know, not everyone is going to choose to use those tools, but they must be made available for those that do want to do it. And so, you know, when we talk about expansion, it's needed to compete with these other regions that have really just kind of opened up the floodgates. It's critical to have enough supply to build a brand, to have enough revenue to employ and run a sustainable and compliant business. In my opinion, a percentage of the acreage makes the most sense. I think this would help minimize some of the parcelization and overdevelopment that's happening in our ag land here in the county. And then we also need cannabis tourism events and the additional license types, primarily the micro business. And I hope to see that kind of follow the winery type model. I think as small farms, and that's even as we begin to expand, we're still going to be small farms in the statewide marketplace. We desperately need to be able to connect and create relationships directly with our consumers. And that's how small farms survive and thrive. And so, you know, again, I applaud the county on taking this proactive approach, and hopefully we can come to a consensus on what expansion looks like, what those additional license types look like, and how we can incorporate cannabis tourism into our county here to create a sustainable and thriving local industry here for years to come.
Okay, thank you, John. Next up, Jimmy Johnson, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Thank you. So I have 3 questions. One, I'm not a grower, so I'm just asking questions to get educated. Our area happens to be private roads, and they are heavily traveled by the cannabis farmers out here. They are setting up commercial grows. That's fine. My question is, how do we recover fees for the additional abuse our roads are taking, because they're private roads? And so how do we come up with a way to charge these growers for the extra use they're putting on it? Water trucks coming and going, heavy equipment coming and going, employees coming and going, because this was originally set up as a neighborhood. There's a lot of land here, but it was set up originally as private home neighborhoods. So is there anything that the county can do to help the small neighborhoods? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, as a non-grower, I'm on a well, and I'm surrounded by huge cannabis farms going in, and we're talking, these are like 40-acre pieces out here. So as the water table gets depleted and I end up without water potentially, do I have any recourse for any of this, since I haven't had any problems for over 20 years? Is there anything that the county can do to help that? And the third one is when you were talking about selling existing property with a permit on it, I was just curious if you have a way to value the permit, like you do right now today with a liquor license. Liquor license typically for a bar has some type of monetary value. So if somebody's gone to the work to get their commercial permit and now they're going to sell everything off, there has to be some kind of value. So would you set a value like based on scale, like how big the business is, or are you just going to leave it for people to negotiate? I'm just curious.
Okay, thanks for the questions. It's important to hear from everybody because community impacts are important. So I'll turn this over to Craig and Jeff.
So road improvements is a good point of emphasis, and I'm glad that was mentioned. It's probably one of the number 1 things that we have heard concerns about from community members. So it's definitely something we need to evaluate when we're talking about other license types. Right now, there are requirements specific to access and egress standards and things like that, but there isn't a ton for existing road maintenance, access to and from, especially if it's not a publicly maintained road. So it's a private association or something like that. The value on like licenses and things like that, typically if the operations stay the same that was approved as part of a license, it runs with the land. We don't have, as from a local government perspective, we don't have a stake in the value of the property or license or anything else. That's negotiated through private parties. As far as an aspect related to wells and access to water, between that and road improvements is probably the number one concern we've heard from communities. So that's definitely something we need to consider, especially when we're talking about increased canopy sizes. Right now, I don't know if there's a great answer related to that, but that's definitely a concern we need to look into when we're talking about this holistically.
Yeah, so anecdotally, I have to say there are private road associations that actually send the same questions, and a couple of them were actually successful by talking to the heavy users and actually come up with an increased fee set for heavy usage, so which would include probably deliveries, water trucks, etc. So that's just a suggestion. Basically, talk to your neighbors. Next up, it would be Jeff. Jeff, can you hear us? And can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, I can hear you guys. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, yeah, I guess I'll join in everyone else saying thanks for your guys' time and hearing us out as part of the community. One of my big questions was there's a few oxymorons in the ordinance where in the sensitive area stuff, and by all means, I definitely respect churches, schools, rehabilitation centers, everything like that. What happens when the citizens of the county, because of lack of information or whatnot at the county accessible to us from the gate, that potentially we run something by someone at the county and maybe get bad advice and pick up a property that, you know, for myself, an example of myself, I ran 2 parcel numbers through the planning department and said, hey, you know, can you help me out as a citizen? I'd really like to see if these zone out. I'd like to get into the cannabis industry here. I was told, hey, these look great. Bought the properties, spent the last year and 3 months developing them, almost put $1 million into them, and then found out there was a private church right behind my property. Literally, like right after I spent $90,000 on a grading job and just have dumped my entire life savings into this, and you know, was told, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that then, and sorry, I just gave you bad advice. You know, I also had purchased the property next to that, which is about 750 feet from the bordering line of the property with the church on it, which happens to be an 82-acre parcel. So it's affecting just massive amounts of citizens that might want to get into this as a business or whatnot. And I completely understand the whole philosophy behind it. But, you know, in this day and age, there's a dispensary on every corner, just like you can go buy alcohol. When I bought those properties, there was an illegal grow on it, as well as a abandoned meth laboratory. I removed both of those and tried to do it by the book. And now I'm kind of stuck in this pickle where I'm kind of just being told, hey, you know, it just is what it is, bro. Bad luck. I was given bad advice. And in the ordinance, it also says that, you know, as a church, you can open up next to a grow operation if you sign a letter of exemption or whatnot. But as a grow operation, you can't open up next to a church if you got them to sign a letter of exemption for you, which I feel is kind of an oxymoron. The second thing is as a citizen of this county, and I've been building here for 4 years, and I've been in the cannabis industry for a long time. I have a resume, a reputation. I have 20 cannabis awards. I was voted into the top 100 most influential people in cannabis. I've been doing this for quite a while, so I know a lot about the industry, how it works, the do's and don'ts, the wrongs and rights. I know a lot of people aren't out here doing things for the right reasons and probably making a mess of things. And there's some of us out here that really want to do it by the book, bring in tax revenue, help the county kind of get rid of the illegal grows, or help them have an opportunity to turn those grows into legal grows at some point, which I feel the ordinance has kind of skipped over a lot of people by making 5-acre minimums, because most people out here that work in this county can't afford to just go buy 5 acres. And a lot of these parcels out here are really hard and unique to find a place to actually cultivate cannabis on them. It took me, 6-7 months to find these 2 properties and to find something that actually zoned out, met the setback requirements, had everything I needed to run into this gigantic problem. Which is why earlier I asked the question about the ordinance and the sensitive areas. The property that I bought above that one is 800 feet away from the property line of the 82-acre parcel. That one is, if you look at the state regulation, they don't even recognize like a church out in a rural area as a sensitive area. But even if they did, it would be a 600-foot setback. The fact that we're making it stricter on the citizens in Nevada County is just making it harder on us to do things. And yeah, this is a super unique situation that I'm in. And luckily I'm financially stable and, but someone else's might have absolutely crippled. And it's definitely unfair for the whole way that it happened. There's no sign. Usually when I look for a church, it's like a building with a cross. My application lawyer missed it. The guy at the planning department missed it, and I missed it. And, until I was told by the guy from PG&E, nobody really knew. And so, when it
Hey,
comes
Jeff,
Yeah.
hey, sorry to cut you off, but I would really like for everybody that wants
Yeah,
to talk to
I
have a
understand.
chance. So if you don't mind, so basically due diligence, is there anything that the county can help out with due diligence? And if due diligence is not done, what are the options?
So I think just to answer that briefly, staff do the best they can when they get general questions on parcels to be able to see if it meets the intent of the ordinance and meets the general requirements. The process of review of ADPs and CCPs, so the smaller and larger cultivation sites, is in depth, and it gets routed to countless agencies, departments. So I know that's not a great answer, but it's hard to do a thorough review to make sure it meets compliance with all standards without having a complete application and everything in. But what I would say is, if you're providing feedback that sensitive sites, the setback needs to be a little bit different. What is that setback? Put that in the chat or put it in the Q&A, and we'll take that moving forward.
Okay, thanks, Craig. And Patricia, are you ready? Would you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, thank you. I have unmuted myself. And thank you for having this session. It's great to listen to other farmers and questions that they have, and have you guys listening to all of us. I think that one of my questions is about the microbiz licenses. I think for us as small businesses, that will help us enormously to vertically integrate what we're doing. We can cultivate and choose amongst some other functions that we think we can work with in our particular geography and everything to expand our business. One of the questions I have about micro business licenses, and you guys might know better than I do, is if you decide you want a micro biz license and you're cultivating, manufacturing, and distributing, let's just say you do those 3 things. Does the county have to have a distribution license available to people individually, so that people can do distribution or manufacturing individually in order to allow for micro business licenses? So this is obviously all on ag zoning, because we're in Penn Valley and we don't have that, that's the zoning that we have. So that's one of the questions I have, is what is the process for micro business licenses? And, I think most of us, it's not cheap to have a micro business license, but I think there are many small farms that will look at that and say, yeah, this is the direction I want to go. I want to vertically integrate. I want to be able to do these other things on my farm. And so there's a big groundswell of support for that particular license. So the question I have, is, do you have to have those individual licenses available as well? Because For example, our farm may want a distribution license, but not a microbiz license. It depends on your business model, which one you're going to want. The other thing I wanted to say is that I really support John Foley's comment in terms of percentage of acreage. If we're looking at expansion, just to look at that as a model, that is, one of the possibilities. Again, we're looking at weird shaped parcels and things like that in this county. So there may be certain parcels that it wouldn't work with, but I would advocate for that, I think, as well. And the last thing I wanted to say is, in terms of enforcement, enforcement being complaint driven is a really, I think that's a solid way to move forward. But if you're a legal farm and you're surrounded by illegal farms who are ruining your roads, just cutting down trees, things like that, and nobody complains, what are the options, I guess, is a question I have. So that's it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys.
All right, thank you. Any feedback?
So Jeff, you want to take the enforcement question that Pat had?
Yeah, there's not a lot of options if nobody complains, because we are complaint driven. So that really is the trigger for us. And so, yeah, if there's people that are, operating unpermitted sites that are ruining roads, somebody needs to submit a complaint, and it can be anonymous. That's the one benefit of cannabis, is that we do have an anonymous complaint format where you could simply just send us an email or a letter or anything, if you want to keep your name out of it, and we'll enter that as anonymous. Your name will not be in our system at all. So that's one of the benefits that we gave to cannabis, because we knew there was concerns, safety concerns and whatnot there. But to answer your question, we would need a complaint the way the current approach is in order to investigate those.
What I will say, this is evolving too. It's still a brand new program, being only 2 years old. So we're figuring out and trying to look at ways how we can be more effective with enforcement. And that may be a change in strategy in years moving forward, or a change in policy from the board. So we've been having those discussions over the last recent months and year. So we'll see how that evolves, but this feedback is crucial, because it's nice hearing from permitted cultivators that want enforcement, to even the playing field and hold people accountable that are bad actors and things like that. The other thing I noted down was related to micro business license types. Definitely, whatever licenses that you're wanting to, or the activity you're wanting to do on site, it has to be allowed via the local ordinance. So that's what we're looking into as far as modifying to allow distribution and certain manufacturing in order to fit in that mold of micro businesses. But what the feedback we're looking for is, what exactly do you need? Distribution is a little bit straightforward, I think, to a certain extent, because you're cutting out the middleman. But like, what manufacturing do you need? What exactly does that mean? Does that mean you want to, create edibles on site? You just want to package and process on site? What exactly are you needing to be successful?
Okay, and we have Michael, are you ready? And could you unmute yourself, please?
Yeah. Just want to say thank you, like everybody's been doing. I always I've been working with the Origins Council, dealing with other counties in the state, and just want to let everyone know how lucky we are in Nevada County. The growers and the enforcement cannabis compliance, how we work together through this industry and how we're building it is something really unique and special to Nevada County. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear our voice and make us feel like, you're really listening and you really care as well as we do to make this industry work. And just have 3 things I wanted to touch on. One is the ability to stack license types on large parcels. I know when it comes to, growing canopy size, our sequel report is going to be kind of the big thing to find out how we can work around and make this all work. But right now, as someone, born and raised here, I'm growing on a 3-generation parcel property that's pretty ideal for expansion. And right now, the only way to expand the business is to buy more property, possibly look at moving or finding a way to manage it without living on site. So having the ability to continue to grow our business and stay put where we want to be would be a really great option to allow in the county. Second thing, like John and Pat mentioned, is giving us the right tools in the county to be more successful. A big thing is the micro business permit. Just simply, we can grow cannabis, but we can't transport it off site. We can't test it. We can't sell it to distributors and manufacturers. All that comes with high fees because we don't have those abilities. Part of my model, being a medical grower for so long, is really still there in the sense that we got into this to create our CBD topicals, such as bath salts and muscle rubs. And so we really would like to be able to distribute and manufacture our own products on site. And just to touch on what you were asking about, Craig, I really am not, on board. I can't say that I support volatile extraction happening on ag land and in residential communities due to the danger and the high cost of build out for those facilities. But infusing products such as topicals or infusing edibles with a manufacturing permit from local manufactured products that have been made in labs suitable in Nevada City would really cut down the safety concern for manufacturing on these residential and ag parcels. Yet it would also offer a pathway to manufacture and create niche small scale products that just aren't feasible to create for the marketplace any other way, really. And lastly, this is just a comment. I know it's kind of is just, I'd really like to see if our county can look at possible ways to move the way we treat the industry more like ag and less like commercial. I know that's a sensitive subject, but just something to always be aware of. We're running commercial businesses, but at the end of the day, a lot of us, especially such as myself, a very small scale, small impact outdoor grow, we're really farming. And it's an ag business, but it's treated as commercial. And I understand there's a commercial element, of course. Just what we can do to lighten up that commercial, there's a lot of commercial things that keep people from being able to get in the industry, and just continuing to look at how we can loosen some commercial regulations and get more ag regulations in there. So that's really all I had to say. Just thank you, keep up the good work, and really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Michael. And Jonathan, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yeah, I just want to reiterate a lot of what's been spoken here. I think we've come a long way, and my participation hasn't been that much in recent years. I do continue to sit on Origins Council, which is a statewide organization working for Appalachians. And I think one of the things that we kind of failed to address previously was the rest of the license types. It really does restrict the supply chain. And I do think that we need to consider, how do we begin allowing for manufacturing, distribution, even potentially delivery retail at some point. That's a big issue within the California marketplace. We have an incredibly low amount of dispensaries in California compared to our per capita, especially in regards to other states that have legalized. And that bottleneck, I think, is doing disservice to a lot of communities, as well as creating issues with the supply chain and the ability for our cultivars to get their product to market. I myself am not a big fan of commodification of the product. It's going to happen. That's absolute and normal. It's not an issue. I do think as an industry, we're small farmers. We need to really push a craft model similar to Napa, Sonoma, and what they've done. So agritourism, I think, is really important. And among those, really looking at the event license. I think that for us to be able to brand ourselves as premium products to get that higher margin, we have to be able to have experiences, food to table, farm to table type events, all sorts of events that would actually be able to draw customers, clients, prospective audiences up here to experience a lot of what we have to offer. That creates a marketing tool that is just going to be so beneficial in being able to pivot to us. So I think that's one of the things that may have been underspoken, but the event license, I think, is an actual very important license for us to move forward. I think I'll stop there, but yes, I want to emphasize that in the craft industry.
Thanks, Jonathan. And Diana.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Diana here with the Cannabis Alliance. Just a few quick comments. The first is we've been hearing from our members about the.
Whoops. Oh, sorry. That my bad. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, I don't know where I left off, but the importance of, as it relates to sensitive use and the 1,000-foot setback, re-looking at that and perhaps using our existing model of how we deal with state parks to have a variance for sensitive uses. And yeah, follow the variance process that we already have so that these properties, some of which were spoken about tonight, and those that are looking to be permitted, that they have a pathway forward. I think we have a really tried and true variance process, so let's see how we can apply it to sensitive uses. And then the second thing is looking at the next stage of the vision of and where we're headed with cannabis here in Nevada County is really working towards that tourism model and considering as we look at, when we talk about micro business, distribution, events, these are all terms that we already have. They already apply to existing agriculture. Micro business is no different than a farm that grows cherries and makes jam on their property. Distribution is just moving the product off-site. And of course, the other micro business model that includes retail is very similar to a winery model. So I would encourage us to look at how we are mitigating neighborhood concerns already for the ag industry and use some of those for cannabis, while of course making sure that we are staying within lines of our CEQA document. And then doing whatever it takes to make sure that FLCs, we're moving that process forward so those are allowed, as many of our businesses or many of our farms are going to be relying on FLCs. And we also get a lot of support from our membership for removing the residency requirement for adjacent parcels, as well as clustering grows on one parcel when you have a larger parcel. So again, trying to steer away from or discourage parceling out large parcels and clustering grows. So thank you for the opportunity and thanks for hosting.
Thank you, Diana. I believe that is for now. It's all the live questions, but we have a bunch of them in the Q&A. If you want to talk live, please just raise your hand and we'll pull you in right here. Otherwise, we'll go back to the Q&A questions. Regarding events, there's some counties that are allowing events, cannabis events in their farmers markets. They just need a secure ingress and egress. Is that anything that you could consider?
So we can, like I mentioned earlier, we can consider anything. That's the feedback we're trying to get, but there's pitfalls and positives to everything. There's definitely some tricky aspects of on-site retail in the unincorporated area that is probably the most tricky out of all these license types based on our conversations with all the stakeholders that we've had so far. But anything is possible. I know other counties are entertaining it or have a process for this already. I know Humboldt has some aspects of that as well right now. So again, if that's something that is needed, we'll definitely look into that.
And how about if there are new regulations, will they require an odor control system before issuing permits?
Odor control, our setback is essentially a mitigating measure for odor, the 100-foot setback. That was listed in our EIR. For some of our smaller parcels, there is odor control mitigation requirements for indoor grows only. So as of right now, there isn't any plan to increase that requirement. But if canopy is increased on sites, that may be something we have to look at to mitigate those impacts. What that looks like, I don't know. And really that is going to be where we land really on the increased impacts of cannabis and the odor that creates.
And is there any consideration given to co-op farming? Because for cost sharing, it would help people instead of having just one or two people, a co-op farming would help people. Is that on the table?
So essentially, a lot of the partnerships we have with permitted farms are sort of that model to a certain extent. We also have the on-site processing license where it's similar to a co-op model. If there's something different outside of that that we don't allow currently, if we could get some feedback on that and put that in the chat, specifically what you're talking about, please do that.
Okay, we have Robert wants to ask a question or share his thoughts. Could you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, good evening. Thank you everybody for hosting this evening. This is a really good meeting of the minds, so I appreciate you all. We have a little bit of a use case or specific scenario in our farm that I'm just wondering if there's something that's being looked at. So we have two properties that are adjacent to each other, owned by the same owners. They're fully permitted, and we are in the process of putting one facility up that does all of our drying and trimming and processing basically of that. But at this point in time, we're not able to move product from the one license to the other, so we can process all that. So we're wondering what kind of options are we looking at or being given, because it doesn't really fall into the micro business. We don't need a distribution license because we're not trying to sell it ourselves. We're willing to go through a dispensary. Also, there is a adjacent property that we could permit and we would like to build a garden on, but there's no permitted house there. In order to get to that property, you need to go through a property with a gate with a permitted house, and so security is not really an issue. So I didn't know if there was a conversation that's coming up that we could potentially have, these unpermitted or these unpermitted areas that could be brought into compliance, assuming that we have, a throughput with a gate with a permitted property behind it.
So that's exactly what we're discussing now, related to the residence requirement. If there's common ownership or it's direct access, that is definitely an opportunity that we've discussed internally and with other stakeholders as well. As far as your other question related to processing cultivated product on adjacent parcel to get processed, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but you can do that now with the way the ordinance currently reads, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he has a processing license on the subject parcel. I didn't hear that part, but.
Yeah, so if you have the correct state licenses, you can do that for their local ordinance.
And going with talking about adjacent parcels, there is, of course, the option to consolidate two adjacent parcels into one, correct?
Correct. There's several projects that have parcel mergers, lot splits, and that's sort of the impacts we're weighing the positives and negatives to that too, because that isn't necessarily the intent of the ordinance. A lot of the times of, splitting a bunch of parcels apart and changing the community out there. So how can we be flexible when we can to meet the intent of the EIR and all the state and local regulations, while also not changing the neighborhood, the aspects of our neighborhood and the environment.
If there are no on-site sales or consumption, is there any reason why farm tours would not be permissible?
So currently that is not allowed based on the ordinance. You know, we've discussed different ways of, depending on the activities on sites for events or tours or things like that, what that would look like. Obviously, the county has a special event ordinance, and maybe there's some opportunities there to fit within that mold specific to cannabis, but these are things we're looking at right now.
And Michael Taylor, can you unmute yourself?
Hi. I have actually quite a few different things that I'm maybe would like to share. And it appears to me that I think a year and a half ago or so that the county was advised by Folsom when the supervisors had their annual meeting of priorities, that partnering with the county, with county citizens. And I think that the county has fallen short of partnering with the cannabis growers. They themselves have identified 3,500, 4,000 growers. Recently, the grand jury has identified the same 3,500, 4,000 growers. And, you know, they've acknowledged that the permitting process has been, it's fallen short of the expectations. And I really feel that if the county was serious, when I say county staff, county supervisors, we're serious about bringing more people into the system. And I don't want to say compliance, I want to say bring them into the system. And there's a difference between compliance and the system. And I'm saying that in the sense that, you know, 3 years ago, a lot of people were running, you know, nonprofits, and they were growing with scripts from their doctors. And somehow that transition from being legal 3 years ago to where we are today is now 1% or 2% or 3%, where back then, 3 years ago, there was a much higher percentage of people that were, you might say, legal as far as state law. And my suggestion is that if bringing growers, 4,000, 3,500 growers into compliance, I would suggest that somehow or another that you partner with them. And you guys each know me personally, and I can personally say that nobody has ever come to me and said, Michael, I'd like to help you, you know, become compliant. That's not happened. And it's interesting that I hear you guys speak to the Board of Supervisors or different people and say that, you know, that's your intention, is to help people become compliant. I think if you want people to feel safe in becoming compliant, I think taking it from the code compliance department of Nevada County and moving it to something that's not involved directly with code compliance. And I've even made suggestions to you, Craig, that somehow or another that you're in the building department and you kind of oversee building. I think it's counterproductive that you are also in charge of code compliance. And I think that asking 4,000 people in the community to trust you or Jeff or anyone in code compliance about coming into compliant is not realistic. And I think that you guys need to come up with a different process or a different system for seriously wanting to bring people into compliance. And I think running it through code compliance is not realistic. I appreciate you listening, and I appreciate, you know, I thank you for sharing, and thank you.
Thank you.
I would like.
And we are at the full hour. There are still some some questions in the Q&A section. Suggestion from Matthew saying, Grass Valley permitting a dispensary after seeing Nevada City's success. How can we link local farmers with local shops, give them a tax break, or lowering the permitting cost for farms that want to partner with the local economy? So partnering, is that something you guys are willing to look at?
Yeah, we have discussions with the cities all the time. We worked directly with Grass Valley when they were analyzing options for cannabis license types and helping them build their program. So we are having those discussions. How can we leverage the relationship between the agricultural cultivator side that's in the majority in the unincorporated area, and then the more commercial industrial side that's in the cities. So definitely some partnership opportunities there moving forward.
And okay, well, the hour is gone. It went by pretty fast, and I would invite both you, Craig, and Jeff, if you would like to conclude this and tell people what the next steps are. How are you going to reach back out? I believe, Craig, you put the survey already in the chat. So are you requesting more input? And if yes, where can people go to provide that input?
So first off, I'd like to thank you, Banat, obviously, for always helping us out with these. It's a huge help for us. So thank you for that. I put a link to the survey in the chat that you can take. You can also find it on our website at Cannabis Compliance. If you just Google Nevada County Cannabis Compliance, it'll go straight to our resources, where the survey is at, this flyer, and everything else. There's also some contact information directly for me and Jeff, so you can reach out and provide feedback directly to us as well. As always, this is just the start of the conversation. We're going to be talking about this throughout this summer, throughout this fall, and how we can move this forward. So please reach out. Don't hesitate to provide feedback, even if it's hard to hear. I would rather get that information out there and be transparent with the information that we're going to be communicating back to our board. So again, thank you for everybody's time. Thank you, Pascal, and look forward to continuing the discussion.
Right, with that, I thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.